All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started while the last remaining folks join in. So again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining me this afternoon to the Solarize Mass and Solarize Mass Plus Community RFP Informational webinar. Again, my name is Lisa Dobbs. I'm a project coordinator here at MassCEC on the solar team, and I work on both the Solarize Mass program, which includes the Solarize Mass Plus program, and I also do work on the HeatSmart program as well. So I'm excited to have everyone here listening in today to learn a little bit about the program, as well as more details about Plus, and some of the new exciting information, including results from last round and new information about this 2019 round. So goals for today's webinar: we're going to learn about MassCEC and who we are, learn about Solarize Mass and the Plus program, a high-level campaign overview, a high-level overview on the application process itself, and an opportunity at the end for questions and answers. So who is MassCEC? For those who are unfamiliar, MassCEC is a quasi-state agency. We are created by an act of legislation, and we gain our funding from the Renewable Energy Trust. That's that small surcharge on ratepayer utility bills. And with that, we're tasked with growing the clean energy economy in Massachusetts, all while helping meet the Commonwealth's climate and clean energy goals. So the slide here has a lot of information on it, but what it's really demonstrating is that we're a multifaceted organization, and we hope to essentially help the clean energy economy in a variety of ways, whether it's helping with innovation infrastructure, such as incubators and accelerators, things like technology development and working with research centers, company development, so helping startups or even investing in companies, also workforce development, ideas like internships and jobs boards. And finally, this green little chunk here on the bottom is the adoption portion that we are also focused on. And that's mainly where I work with the Solarize Mass program. And that's really helping in a variety of ways educate consumers on these commercially available technology, as well as begin programs like Solarize Mass to help them actually go through with adoption as well. And this is also on the residential and commercial scale. So a little bit of a background on Solarize Mass. Solarize Mass was launched in 2011. So now with 2019, we're entering our 9th year. So far, we've been in, there we go. In over 19% of Massachusetts communities have participated thus far throughout the rounds. Currently, we have 3 communities still participating in the 2018 round, so we're excited to see who's interested for 2019. But what this map also demonstrates is the true grassroots focus of this program in taking a look at the different rounds and seeing how, as time went on, community member talked to community member, it kind of spread the word not only about solar, but about the program as well. So for those that have participated thus far, we have seen results of over 3,400 solar PV contracts. That represents about 23 megawatts worth of solar PV capacity. To put that in perspective, Massachusetts on the whole has about 2,200 megawatts, a little bit more than that at this point. But that's just really showing how impactful this small residential scale program is. And what we're also seeing across the program is about 20% average savings across each round. And I'll dive into that a little bit deeper in just a minute. So in terms of Solarize Mass, okay, what is Solarize Mass? So Solarize Mass is a community-based and driven education outreach and group purchasing campaign with main components being a competitive installer selection and a group purchasing. And a fixed and discounted price as well. And so essentially how this all ties together is when you have a grassroots community outreach type program, you're helping drive down the cost stack for what an installer might give to a consumer for a price for solar PV, for example. So when you become a marketing and outreach arm, what you're essentially helping to do is squish down those sales and soft costs for an installer and then they're able to pass that cost savings down to the consumer. So this is a model that has been proven to increase adoption, reduce time to contract, and reduce those costs. All of the things that we'll talk about in a moment. Breaking this down a little bit further, Solarize addresses market barriers. So a little bit about, just like what was spoken about in the previous slide, is there's cost barriers. So everyone thinks that solar has quite a high upfront cost. So solutions, we offer a group purchasing model that's driving the cost down for everyone, as well as significantly competitive pricing. Solar can be complex with a competitive installer selection and vetting, as well as transparent pricing. That really helps ease the burden on the consumer to really know that they can be comfortable with what is being offered to them. It also can take some time to install, or to contract for solar. So this can be a big challenge. So when you've got a program that's helping inspire action, it's a limited time offer. And there's a really strong component of neighbor-to-neighbor communication that really helps folks, overcome those barriers. So I mentioned the overall average discount that folks are seeing throughout the course of the program. In taking an analysis of the program 2012 through 2016, you can see an average reduction versus, so the Solarize price versus the market price, ranges anywhere from 13 to 21%. So again, that's where about that average of 20% comes from. And early numbers for 2017, we're working on finalizing the analysis, is actually also seeing approximately 20% savings off the average market price. So you can see that it's been very consistent over the years, and 20% is really a great discount off the average market price. So what is Solarize Mass Plus? So Solarize Mass Plus is taking the same Solarize Mass model for PV and offering competitive pricing and education on solar PV and additional complementary technology or technologies. So we provided some examples here of those that pair well naturally with solar PV, and those that we're providing as examples as potential successes for pairing for this particular program. So technologies like solar hot water or solar thermal, air source heat pumps, also referred to as mini splits, ideas for battery backup, electric vehicles, and also an opportunity for those folks out there to propose ideas that they may think are good that are mainly residential consumer focused. So you also have an opportunity with this RFP to take a look at those technologies as well as coming up with some ideas yourself, and we'd love to hear them. So the program itself also has benefits combining not only to those who are participating, but also to that individual consumer. They have an opportunity to maximize cost savings by installing both or multiple technologies at once, further reduce their carbon footprint. There's also an option for additional MassCEC incentives. So actually solar PV and solar hot water, the solar hot water incentive actually gives you an additional benefit if you do install your solar PV either at the same time or just have solar PV already. There's an opportunity for cross promotion. So the idea of saying using solar PV to heat your home or hot water when you pair those technologies. What's also good about the program and the way it's designed is that you can receive quotes for one or both technologies under the program. So that really helps broaden the base of community members that you can reach, whether they already have solar PV or don't have an opportunity for solar PV. You can reach all of those consumers all together with this one program. So I'm sure we're all a little bit curious as to, all right, who's adopted it so far? What technologies did they do? How did it go? So we piloted the program in 2017, and we got 4 communities, a grouping of 3, and a single community to propose to the program. Lincoln Sudbury Wayland is a group, proposed PV plus solar hot water. On the whole, they educated 285 residents in PV and contracted for 53 PV systems. They also educated 148 residents on solar hot water and contracted for 27 solar hot water systems. What's interesting to learn about that is that each community in that program doubled or even tripled the amount of solar hot water systems in their community and really educated a lot of consumers on these technologies. Newburyport opted for air source heat pumps. They educated 158 interested residents in PV and contracted for 26 systems. They also educated over 100 people in air source heat pumps and contracted for 10 air source heat pump systems. For 2018, we have Lowell participating with PV plus air source heat pumps. That program is ongoing and isn't set to end until early 2019, so we'll have some results then. But we can see already early numbers are showing that a lot of folks are actually opting for both technologies, and that's really proving the model. The other thing to really highlight as a part of this program is the amount of folks that we're educating, because that's a really important piece of the program. These can be sometimes lesser known technologies, and we're finding that the education is just as valuable as the adoption. So on that note, lessons learned from the pilot, just like I mentioned, education on these additional technologies is definitely still a barrier, but this program is really helping address that. We're hearing feedback from both community members and installers alike that just simply the value of being able to educate people on these technologies is worth the program itself, whether they're able to adopt during the program or whether they know that they have the opportunity to adopt later. Again, it's an increased opportunity for those with non-feasible PV sites or those looking to deepen their investment. So again, like I mentioned, you could have a lot of folks that already have PV, but you can reach out to them again to see if they want to be able to deepen their impact to maybe install hot water, maybe an electric vehicle, or further electrify their home and adopt some air source heat pumps. You also can reach those that don't have solar PV but have good sites, or those that previously found out that they didn't have a good site and may still find out that they have an opportunity to adopt something like hot water or air source heat pumps. Additionally, also, according to survey respondents, a vetted installer for a plus technology particularly is an important program component. We find this across the board with the program, but we felt it valuable to note because, again, it's really proving the model in the idea that people can become more comfortable with these ideas when they know that the community has vetted this installer on their behalf and they're getting competitive pricing. So we have, within the RFP itself, we have a lot of valuable resources and information on, okay, which technology should I consider if I'm interested in plus? Just some high-level notes for clean heating and cooling technologies. So again, things like air source heat pumps and solar hot water. Communities with a higher percentage of homes with high-cost heating fuels have a good opportunity because in changing out these systems, it provides better economics, especially when replacing high-cost heating fuels such as something like oil, propane, or electric baseboard. So considering plus air source heat pumps or solar hot water can really be a good opportunity. Another thing to consider is if your community actually has a strong history of solar PV adoption, because that actually provides a great platform for electrification. So again, things like electric vehicles, air source heat pumps, and things of the like. So even if you have a lot of PV, a plus might be a pretty good option to continue with that platform. So again, the RFP itself has links to this information, but I also did want to show you just a quick snippet from our website, and this is also linked in the RFP, but we do have a great online resource for those to take a look at, okay, does my community have a high percentage of high-cost heating fuels? Let me consider if I do have a good opportunity here. And so you can see on this map, again, it's interactive, so you can really click on your individual community, but you can see how you can see the range from a high percentage to a lower percentage. Now, this is also not to say that a lower percentage community doesn't have a good opportunity, but we just want folks to consider their options. So I have a quick poll out there. It's not a physical poll in the webinar, but we wanted to use this webinar to also hear from you. And what we want to ask you to do is use the question section, so there's no physical poll, but use the question section to answer the following question. What other barriers, market or otherwise, do you see or hope to see Solarize Mass or Solarize Mass Plus address? So feel free to write that in at any time, any point you may come up with an idea or a thought. We would just like to hear from you. So next, I want to move on to a very high-level campaign overview so people can get a sense of kind of what end-to-end happens throughout the course of a campaign. So the first thing that you want to consider is creating your team. So again, all of this information is contained in the RFP, but just kind of want to give you a little bit of a trajectory. So this might be where a lot of folks are now, considering who might want to participate, who might be part of your team. Once you've created your team, then you want to start following through with putting together your application and submitting it for selection. That's when MassCEC is going to come in contact with you, review, and potentially select your community if we find you've got a good plan and you've got a good opportunity for success. Once a community is selected, we're going to offer training and facilitate an installer selection process. Then you're going to select your installer. After you select your installer, you're going to engage in pre-launch planning with MassCEC and your installer. So that'll take maybe a week or two as well. Then beyond that, you're going to launch your campaign, and that usually entails a launch or a meet the installer event. So that's a really big event up front to really announce your campaign and say, hey, we're ready to go, signups are ready to go. Then you're maintaining momentum, so then you've got your sign-up period. So you're just going to go through, continue to get leads, continue to drive folks to learn more about the campaign, and hopefully get lots of signups along the way. At the end, you're going to celebrate and share your results. So this is also highlighted in the RFP as well with a sort of a best practices timeline. This is on pages 14 and 15, but that's also going to give you a perspective of kind of end to end, how long this campaign might last. And just kind of on a high level, you may consider that your commitment could be anywhere from 6 months to a year. So in considering getting involved and what kind of team you might want to put together, as well as the roles that MassCEC and everyone else who participates plays, just want to give you a nice little overview of who's involved and what our roles are. So MassCEC, so first and foremost, we of course put out each round of the program. Once we get communities selected, we collaborate with them to develop and launch the installer RFP. And we also provide a technical consultant in aiding in that procurement. We also contract with the installer on behalf of the community. We train volunteers and offer marketing grant and materials, which we'll talk about in a minute. And again, we help facilitate that big launch event or the Meet the Installer community presentation. Once up and running, MassCEC also is available as a resource through facilitating check-in calls, measuring results with weekly metrics, reviewing and approving and helping aid with marketing materials, and just generally being around to help assist communities as needed. So what we provide as well in terms of kind of those marketing grants and materials is we offer a banner if you choose to have one, things like t-shirts, marketing template documents, as well as ongoing support in document and media relation development. So that's really important to consider as well. And we offer marketing grants from $5,000 to up to $13,000, depending on community eligibility. And that's something that I'm going to break down for you in just a few minutes. So community, okay, so community would obviously be the participant and also the applicant in this program. And so you're, of course, going to apply and hopefully be selected to the program. You're going to collaborate with MassCEC to select your installer. And really one of the main focuses of the community members, aside from that installer selection and your volunteer team, is to get out there and engage community members. So you're really that marketing and an education arm. So you're increasing awareness about the program, creating buzz, co-branding the logo, getting it on flyers, getting it out there, educating folks on the basis of PV or other technologies, always recruiting primary and secondary volunteers to help with outreach work. Of course, reduce barriers to these technologies when possible, set community expectations on program goals and timeline, and also be that direct liaison between MassCEC and the installer as well. Additionally, things to consider as a part of that volunteer team is creating your team and the key roles that you want to fill. All of these roles are outlined in detail in the RFP on pages 4 to 8. But just as a nice little reminder, you always want to make sure that you recruited your solar coach and your municipal representative. Those are 2 key roles. And you also want to consider additional roles to really have a deep bench for a campaign like this. So solar or other technology ambassadors, this is actually a really good opportunity to engage those that already have these technologies. They can help spread the word about the program, be on a Q&A panel, or even host an open house. Somebody focused on web and media coordination is very helpful. Engaging youth volunteers or canvassers, and also a lead contact for engaging moderate and low income residents, and this is particularly if you have a focus in that area. So your installer, as a community, when you select them, they become your technical expert and sales engine for the community. They perform those site visits and answer all technical questions. They do some installation throughout the course of the program, but they're generally focused on sales and aiding and outreach. You'll also set up a meeting with the installer to learn about their sales and installation processes, so you can convey that to the community. They'll also coordinate it with marketing ideas and share other proposals that they might have. And there'll also be a direct line of connection for you to learn about how the leads are progressing throughout the course of the campaign, so you can help be a part of the progress as well. So for homeowners, these are going to be your participants. They get to sign up for a site assessment and spread the word. So help them also learn that they can create the buzz too for this program, and really it's a benefit to all. So the funding opportunities. So as I alluded to before, every community is eligible for a 5,000 standard base marketing grant. And every community, again, based on eligibility, has an opportunity to take a look and see if they might also be eligible for additional marketing grant adders. So the first one is a large community adder. So you would be eligible for an additional $2,500. And this is if your community has over 10,000 residential properties. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that it's residential properties and not just residents. So, take a look and see if your community might be eligible for that. If you participate in Plus, you're also eligible for an additional $1,000 per technology. So for example, if you opt for solar PV plus solar hot water, you'd be eligible for your standard $5,000 plus an additional $1,000. So you may be eligible for up to $6,000. The final adder is called the Affordable Access Adder. And this is an effort to help increase outreach and support for low and moderate income customers. So municipalities with a median household income below the state average, and or those that have at least 25% of census block groups that meet the Commonwealth's environmental justice criteria. Directly on the website, on the RFP on the website, we address where you can find this information with direct links to online PDFs. Additionally, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us anytime about that. And additionally, just wanted to note that review the RFP thoroughly for that particular adder because you'll want to also propose to us a set outreach plan that you would use with those specific funds. So another just quick poll just to learn a little bit more from your team. Have you been to the Solarize Mass website? Have you found the information you need on that? Again, we're just trying to get a sense of the resources that we have out there, and are they helpful, or is there something that we can add? So again, just use the question section to respond. And with that, while you're considering it, I do actually want to just take you to a screenshot of our website, and I want to highlight two things. I want to first show you where you can find your information on how do I apply. Our website currently has accordions labeled by kind of context. And the first one is our How Do I Apply? This is going to help you learn where all of the RFP information is, as well as timeline. Beyond that, we have a program background tab. And what that has now is a listing both of resources, kind of historical references and results. But what it also has now is some additional resources toolkits. And we wanted to highlight this because we felt that we wanted to offer even more resources to your communities, especially when considering Plus technologies. So we have a lot of our standard best practices guidelines, Solarize guidebook, but what I wanted to call to your attention is we now offer a downloadable one-page handout for you to help promote the program in your community, maybe pre-participation, for those to learn about what the program is and some of the details. So feel free to just download that in print and pass that away. We also have technology 101s for solar hot water, air source heat pumps, and electric vehicles. And this should really help you, number one, identify if it's a good opportunity for your community, but also it is a great download and print and handout to share with those about what the program is and whether or not they may also have a good opportunity for this technology. We also offer a template collaborator commitment letter. And essentially what this is just as it sounds, an opportunity for those that may be joining in, may be collaborating with you, which we're really strongly encouraging as a part of these campaigns. They can just download and kind of get a really good idea of a nice template for them to use to show their commitment for you. What we are also aware of is there's a lot of fantastic entities out there that also have really great resources. So we're looking more and more into those to see what we can just kind of share. So just want to credit New York Sun and NYSERDA. We linked their guidebook here. We think it's a fantastic resource. We really wanted to bring that to your attention. So with that, pretty brief overview there, but wanted to dive into some of the details. But we also leave now time for questions and answers. So please feel free to, again, use the question section just like you were before to answer any questions you might have. Also, just for everyone's reference, this is being recorded. So you will receive a recording and it will also be posted on the website afterwards. So you'll be able to share it with those that maybe missed out, or just share it with those that want to learn a little bit more about the program. So the first question, great question. Approximately how long is the campaign from start to finish? Basically, from starting your team to installers installing. So I think the first point of clarification I think I'll put out there is we tend to only get communities, at application. So I will say that we don't always know how long it's taken them to create a team. So I think that's just the first caveat I'm going to put out there. But what I will say is, generally speaking, from initial application through end of a campaign, so basically the end of a sign-up period, so basically when your offer ends, that can often run approximately a year. It may be slightly less, it may be slightly more. Also then, after the campaign sign-up period has been completed, your selected installer has 1 year to install all of those systems. So they may also be working longer than that, but generally speaking, the commitment for a volunteer team is probably going to be about a year, give or take. And then there's some additional commitments for installers kind of beyond that, although they come into the phase a little bit later. So hopefully that gives a pretty good overview, but feel free to reach out or ask some additional details on that if there was any point that you wanted explained that I missed. So next question, under the PLUS program, does one have multiple installers for various technologies? So that's a great question. So this really ranges. You can have the opportunity, so Lowell right now is participating, and they're actually participating with one installer even though they have multiple technologies, because their installer just so happens to install multiple technologies. But I think what can tend to be more common, although again it ranges, is especially if you're doing PLUS, you might opt to choose kind of the best of all. And so what we've seen communities do so far, more often than not, is select one for PV and one for their additional technology. So it's possible you may have 2, 3, or maybe even 4, depending on how many technologies you choose to promote. So it's pretty flexible in that sense. So that's something that, if a community is interested, we discuss that with them and come up with a really good strategy. But like I said, we've seen anything range from 1 to 2, because right now at this point we've only seen 1 per technology, or communities are generally opting for just 1 additional technology. But what I'll also say is, sometimes what you may also see, even if you just do solar PV and don't opt for a PLUS program, is in certain areas you might actually see partnerships of installers that want to put together a team for you if they feel that you have a good program and want to support you but maybe don't have the capacity, and they might come with some preformed partnerships. So a lot of opportunity there to see kind of various things happen. So there's a question out there: Can the PV be combined? Can the PV be combined with battery storage? And so on that, the answer is there's an opportunity, yes. So what we hope for the Plus program is that, and I should say this is not necessarily exclusive to the Plus program. If your installer just happens to offer PV plus battery storage, so let me say that first. But there is also an opportunity for communities to seek out an installer that might offer both, to try to offer discounts on both. So that's kind of what we're really hoping with folks getting interested in Plus, is to propose creative ideas like that could help also drive that as well. And we also see a really good opportunity for it, particularly because the new SMART program, so that's the sort of newest version of SREX, kind of, if you will, not quite, but a follow-up program, if you will. And they offer additional incentives for batteries. So there may be a good opportunity to consider that. So a question is this a competitive grant process for communities? Yes, it is. So the process itself, you do have to reach out and apply to us and go through a review process. And the only, I would say, stipulation on that is that it is a rolling process. So it's not all coming in at once. Communities may apply anywhere from now, since it's opened, all the way up through April 17th. So you've got some time to consider when might be good for your community. But yeah, it is a competitive process. So great question here. When is a good time for communities to run a Solarized Mass program? So that certainly varies. So the things that you want to consider when thinking about that is knowing your individual community and knowing kind of the trajectories of the timelines, and the fact that you may launch anywhere from kind of a 4 to 6 month campaign, give or take how long you want to run it, and what that may fall into. If your community is, let's say, very seasonal and either gets very quiet in the summer or so super active that you won't have time in the summer, that might be something to consider, where you may want to kind of push your campaign more towards either the bulk of it being in the winter and spring, or maybe the bulk of it being in the fall and winter. So there isn't necessarily any one good time, but there's just things that you might want to consider. So, applying now is a good opportunity to get things launched in kind of early winter and through spring and early summer, if you know that your community may be affected seasonally. Also, we've heard anecdotally that sometimes elections can sometimes affect it, because everyone gets really focused on that, and you may lose attention. So just kind of anything big that might happen in your community, just things to consider as a part of knowing that your active sign-up period might be anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and just consider that it may take 4 to 6 weeks for us to approve your application, and maybe another 4 to 6 weeks for training and release of an RFP. Your installer RFP, and so the fact that you may be upwards of 3 months before your campaign may launch. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another good question here, great question about Plus. A resident does not have to install solar, but can take advantage of another technology. So yes, if your community elects to apply for Plus, and let's say opts for Plus solar hot water and air source heat pumps, for example, your community member can sign up to learn about PV only, can sign up to learn for hot water only or air source heat pumps only, or can sign up to learn about all three. So that's one of the really nice benefits about the program, because again, that can reach some of those folks that maybe don't have a good site for solar, or maybe have solar and want to deepen their impact. What is the benefit of communities collaborating on the campaign? So another really good question. So there's a great benefit in communities collaborating. One of the very specific benefits is specifically just to meet the criteria. So we do have eligibility requirements on amount of households in a community. You can find that on page 15 of the RFP. But some communities need to collaborate simply because they want to meet that minimum requirement. And one of the reasons why we have that requirement is we want a really competitive installer selection process. And a larger subset of communities that has a larger amount of households is likely going to garner a higher and more competitive amount of bids. So that's just something that we really like to set the communities up for success. And then beyond that, other benefits for communities collaborating is just a lot of economies of scale. We found that just a lot of communities maybe have shared media, shared main roads where you can promote the program, shared volunteer teams. So there's just a lot of opportunity, especially if your communities are located close to each other and just have a lot of shared either kind of community assets or maybe even regional schools that really enhances the benefit of connectivity and getting the message out there and not having to put as much legwork in. Can owners of multifamily properties participate? Good question. So yes, they can, but that's something that can obviously, I think probably, as you're aware, be more challenging. So that's something that an owner of a multifamily, again, probably depending on size, because that may factor into the length of time or how complicated it might be, but that's something that you just have to be prepared for being able to discuss that with a potential installer. And that's also something that if you know upfront that, let's say, your community has a lot of multifamily properties, that's something where there's a good opportunity to address that as a part of the installer RFP, to potentially, put out there to the installers, hey, we have a lot of multifamily and we really may show preference to someone that has experience there and is willing to take the time and work with that. On the note of community collaboration, is it feasible for more than one community to collaborate? And yes, absolutely. I believe we do place a limit on total amount, which I believe we've placed at upwards of 4. But yes, so anywhere from 1 to 4 can. And again, there's a lot of benefits with for why to do so. And if you have a concept that may involve more than 4, feel free to reach out to us and talk to us about that individual opportunity to see if it's something that may work. Is there a reporting requirement on the part of communities as a part of the grants, and how do you measure success? So each community does sign a letter agreement with us as a part of the program. So there are certain requirements that go into that, and I wouldn't say that there isn't a lot of specific reporting involved in that. If anything, it's more that an installer is going to report kind of the week-to-week metrics, so kind of how things are going, how many leads, how many contracts. But what there is going to be kind of a requirement is just that open communication and ensuring that MassCEC is in the loop about kind of what's happening. And, as a part of the RFP itself, if you take a look at the very bottom of the RFP document, we have an example terms and conditions document that you can take a look at, and especially municipalities should take a look at, just to kind of take a look at some of the requirements that come into play when participating. How do we measure success? We measure success in a lot of different ways, but some of the main metrics we're going to look at is just how many people were simply reached, so how many people expressed interest. So that was that note that I had made about the 2017 pilot and how one of the Plus campaigns garnered well over 400 people interested. That's a metric of success. Contracted systems is a metric, or even just taking a look at how many maybe PV systems versus additional technology systems. And there's other types of success as well as to how favorably the program was viewed. or what was the average discount people received. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it as well. And some of it may even be taking a look at things on kind of a community size basis and the overall penetration of these technologies and how that might compare a small community versus a large community. So. Do we generally find that Solarize teams are generally from the green communities committees or additional volunteers? More often than not, we certainly find that those who are already involved in a sustainability committee or a green committee, an energy coordinator, can often be the core of these teams, but that is certainly not to say that anyone in the community isn't eligible to help. That just tends to be a natural core. So that's a really great place to start, especially when you're starting to consider who might be a good fit for being on this team or may have a good concept of the time commitment. But again, it can be anyone. Anyone that is genuinely interested in learning about these technologies and promoting them is going to be well suited for this program. So in a community with older housing stock that may have, maybe something like knob and tube, which may potentially be a barrier to entry for solar, would a homeowner need to upgrade their wiring to accommodate? So yes, these are going to depend on any given situation, depending on what an installer will technically install with. But sometimes we will commonly see that an installer may say, all right, you've got to upgrade your panel, for example, or your service panel as a part of being able to install solar. So that's where your solar installer as your technical expert is going to come in and do those one-on-one evaluations to help each individual homeowner know what they would have to do to safely install solar. And as well as how much it costs. And that is something that is very transparent about the program, where you're going to learn what the base price for a solar system may potentially be per watt, and then what might be an adder that might increase the cost of a system. And a service panel upgrade or electrical work or wiring work may be, again, just an additional cost. And I'll just take the time for maybe one or two more questions. I've got a couple good ones here still, but I think the thing that I will note is, like I mentioned, MassCEC is available pretty much at any time. Solarize at MassCEC.com, and I'll put that on the last slide so that people can see it to answer any additional questions. Just on the same note, just getting specific about housing, are there installers who specialize in older housing? I will be honest, I don't entirely know the answer to that question. It's possible. There are definitely installers that specialize or are more willing to do certain things than others. So that's something that might be worth doing, both maybe some initial outreach to local area installers if you're potentially interested to kind of see who's out there. But again, that's also something that we always encourage folks to consider as a part of that installer RFP, in putting some specific either opportunities or challenges that your community might have, and see how then an installer is willing and able to address it. So final question here. Sorry, I lost my questions there, folks. Sorry. So if a community has any specific questions additionally beyond this about the RFP and applying, okay, so how do you reach out and do you recommend doing this? So absolutely. So of course, the first great step is to attend this webinar and ask all the really great questions. Beyond that, again, I'm going to leave the last slide on for a couple of minutes so that everybody can see it, but it's going to have our direct contact information. And we really encourage folks to email us with as many questions as you have, as well as potentially set up a phone call. We're happy to take the time out to talk to you about your interests, teach you more about the program, and answer any additional specific questions you might have about either the program itself or potentially looking into what technology might be a good fit. So we're really happy to answer all of those questions at any point during your consideration process. Let me get that contact information slide up there for everyone. They can see it. So our website, again, you can find it a couple of different ways, but easiest is just www.solarizemass.com. The main email address to reach us is, again, solarize@masscec.com. And again, like I've mentioned, please reach out to us anytime. And I think with that, I think that pretty much covers all the questions. Hopefully I didn't miss any, and if I did, I'll make sure to parse through them at the end and reach out to folks individually to answer those questions. We'll also probably post some FAQs on the website as well. And like I mentioned, this webinar is going to be available on the website and also sent directly to you so that you can review it again and reach out with any additional questions. So I think with that, since I don't see any additional questions, I want to thank everyone so much again you had a lot of really fantastic questions today. Thank you for taking the time out to learn, and definitely reach out to us with any and all questions.